Mary and Martha. Two sisters living under the same roof. But just because Luke's gospel says they were siblings, and just because they shared the same house, doesn't mean they shared the same priorities or the same opinions about what is and isn't important. We read that Mary sat at the feet of Jesus, drinking in every word he had to offer, listening deeply to what he had to say. Now, we have no way of knowing what he was rattling on about. Maybe he was talking to her about the imminence of the reign of God. Maybe he was trying out one of his parables on her to see how well it went over. Or maybe he was just sharing his life experiences. Maybe he was telling her it's not a bed of roses being the Messiah. It seems like every word, every deed, even if it's a good deed, is challenged by lawyers and religious folk. Even people from your own hometown want to throw you off a cliff. Maybe Jesus was just taking an opportunity to unload on his friend, because it ain't easy being the Messiah. And there Mary sat at his feet, listening to every word while Martha is in the kitchen rattling pots and pans. She probably hears snippets of Jesus' stories, and so she knows what he needs is a good meal. Biscuits and gravy, a bit of collard greens on the side, maybe some fried up potatoes. And so she goes to town in the kitchen while Mary sits on her duff, leaving Martha to do all the work. And when she just can't take it anymore, she voices her complaint to Jesus, only to receive what feels like a rebuff from the good rabbi. He points out that Mary, not Martha, is doing the better thing. Mary, who is sitting around ignoring her sister's tireless efforts, is praised while Martha is slammed. Or at least that's the way it must have felt to Martha. And that's the way I've heard a lot of people approach the story. Mary wins and Martha loses. Prayer and meditation win this round in the game of spirituality, and action and social justice lose. At least in this account. But not everything in this world is black or white. It's not always a win-lose situation. Instead of this story being an illustration of how we approach spiritual life, I think it may simply be a quick snapshot of a day in the life of Jesus. And in this particular instance, Mary listened to what Jesus needed to share. But Martha didn't. She busied herself with household distractions. Both of them had different opinions about what needed to be done to best meet the needs of their dear friend and rabbi. But on this particular visit, Jesus needed to be heard, not fed. You know, the household we've heard about this morning from the Gospel of Luke isn't the only one, with members who have different priorities and different opinions. I think it's just part of the human condition, don't you? We all seem to disagree on something. Some of us are Democrats and some of us are Republicans. Some are pro-gun rights and some are anti-gun. Some feel we should welcome all immigrants, and some feel we've got to protect our borders against what feels like an invasion. Some of us ally ourselves with the Black Lives Matter movement, and some of us are just as passionate that all lives matter. Yes, I went there. I named that big old elephant in the middle of the room. The one Reverend Elder Dwayne Johnson preached about on the last sermon of our denomination's global conference. That elephant tattooed with all kinds of isms sitting in the middle of the room. Yes, I went there. We are a church of good people who disagree passionately about how to deal with the problems in our society. Just like Mary and Martha disagreed about how to take care of Jesus' needs. And our own little church family is nothing but a reflection of our denomination, which is a reflection of our nation. And when we disagree, we can do one of several things. One way we can deal with it is to separate ourselves from each other. We can walk out claiming there's no place for me here, so I'm out of here. We can do that, and some have. Or we can drive people away, which has also been done. Friends, berating the church members because they believe differently, or berating the church because it doesn't admonish those people, is not the way to do church. And it's certainly not the way to do MCC. I look at MCC as a kind of hostel. Does everyone know what a hostel is? A hostel is an establishment that provides inexpensive food and lodging for a group of people, such as students, workers, or travelers. MCC provides a place to rest and food for the soul of the weary traveler. I've recently come to accept that Mark and I operate a cat hostel at our house. We keep the garage door partly open to provide shelter from storms for neighborhood stray cats, and we put out food and water for them. Right now there's Tomcat, Miss Kitty, Mama Cat, and her 3 kittens, and Black Cat. Okay, we're not real creative when it comes to names. But when we came back from conference, the only one we could find was Black Cat, as affectionate and loving as ever, until we heard a cat fight. And sweet little Black Cat, it seems, was tearing into all the other cats who thought they were entitled to food or shelter. Now we have to put out food in out-of-the-way places so the others can eat without getting ripped apart by sweet little Black Cat. Now, I would like to think that because we have more gray matter upstairs in our heads than a cat, we could be a bit more civil. I would like to think that, but I have yet to see it. Just like a bunch of stray cats, some people lay claim to our church as their territory, as if it is to be defended against outsider points of view. And one's self-righteous morality is supported with snippets from their favorite news sources instead of listening to the real-life experiences of their neighbor or meditating on the words and actions of Jesus. So that's one way of dealing with our differences. Refusing to budge on our opinions as we walk away, or driving a wedge between ourselves and others, hoping they leave. Another way is the way Martha chose to deal with it. We busy ourselves with activities. We pretend there is no problem. We ignore it. We refuse to talk about it. And we feel that if everyone just unites around an activity, it doesn't matter what activity, just something that will distract us from our differences. If we can all just work together, we'll be happier. Now, there are all kinds of ways to distract ourselves from our differences. We can focus on church finances, uniting around a fundraiser, doing everything we can to get the budget back into the black. Or we can focus on building repair, because with a building as old as ours, there's always something that needs to be done. Or we can fill up our calendars with enough activities, meetings, and church programs to make us feel effective. We can rattle pots and pans in the kitchen and insist that others join us. Or we can sit at the feet of each other, or sit at the table with each other and listen. That's what Mary did. As uncomfortable as it may have been to hear the heartbreaking stories Jesus was sharing, she sat and listened. She committed herself to hearing what he had to say. Can we do the same? Are we willing to do the same? Instead of walking away, instead of driving others away, instead of refusing to talk about our differences, instead of pretending there are no differences, are we willing to sit at the table and listen? Really listen to each other? And are we willing to be vulnerable enough to share our own stories? Friends, if we continue to pretend there is no elephant in the room, we are doomed. Let me remind you what MCC's newly adopted statement of faith says. We don't all believe exactly the same things, and yet in the midst of our diversity, we build community grounded in God's radically inclusive love for all people. We are part of an ongoing conversation. Brothers and sisters, it's time. It's time to have a conversation about our differences. And I'm talking about a real face-to-face conversation, not a virtual Facebook conversation where we can take cover behind our computers and iPhones. It's time to have a conversation while remaining open to the possibility of change. Not insisting upon it, but remaining open to it. And after we have that conversation, that sacred and holy conversation, whether we are Republican or Democrat, pro-gun or anti-gun, pro-immigration or anti-immigration, Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. After we have the conversation, may we grasp the hand of the person next to us and acknowledge that we are all on a journey and we need each other to survive. May we look into the eyes of each other and remember that we are all children of God.